I'm Dave Albrechta. This is Lawyers as Healers, where I explore how lawyers are becoming healers of human conflict. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lawyers as Healers. I'm really excited to have today's guest, who is Jason Ciofalo. I didn't ask if I pronounced that correctly. Did I
Yeah,
get it?
you did. You did
All
perfectly.
right,
Yes.
perfect. And also known as Jason Zuk, the social psychic. And Jason is both a licensed attorney and an intuitive psychic medium whose work explores the intersection of logic, intuition, personal transformation, and consciousness. What really interested me in Jason's story is that he's navigating this tension that a lot of professionals experience in different ways, which is this kind of tension or polarity between our analytical identity, I'll call it, that we build for the external world, and these deeper intuitive parts of ourselves that I think often get pushed aside and become subpoints to the bigger narrative. So welcome, Jason. I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Thank you so much, Dave, for having me on. I really appreciate the conversation and look forward to talking to you about this stuff.
So, yeah, if you could just start, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, your path through law and your legal career and what led you to, the position you're in now of being an kind of open medium psychic lawyer.
Thank you. Actually, I trained to be a lawyer. I did my law school and went up to Georgetown, got my advanced degree in international law, came back to Tampa. My grandparents were alive at the time. And I came back to Florida and got a legal job. And as I was working in that first job, I had a premonition for the last 7 years before that if my grandfather ever passed, I'd be by myself with no one to console me or whatever. So fast forward, my grandfather gets sick my first year of my real legal job, and I was with him for those 7 or 8 months before he passed because he had congestive heart failure and all that. He had a stroke, and when he had a stroke, I was up in a deposition in Wisconsin, Baraboo, Wisconsin, for my legal job. And my mom called me at 8:07 at night or around that time, 8:12, I think it was, to tell me my grandfather died. And I was by myself with no one to console me because I was stuck there overnight. What the part I left out that I didn't know from my premonition is that orbs of light appeared in my hotel room that night, and it was my grandfather's energy consoling
Mhm.
me, telling me, "Son, don't worry about me. I love you. You'll never have to worry about me not being around. I'm always going to be with you. Go get some food for yourself." And so I was like amazed. These orbs of light, this loving feeling filled my heart. I knew it was him. And I went to Panera. I think it was a Panera Bread so many years ago. It's 2004. So I feel like it was yesterday, but I was at a restaurant. One of my best friends from high school contacted me to follow up on my grandfather because she knew he had a stroke. And I told her he died. And I could tell for the first time she was skeptical. I sensed it. My spidey sense went off. And I was like, well, if you're not picking up on this and believing me, what if your grandmother could talk to you? And she's like, what do you mean? My grandma's been dead 6 months. And then all of a sudden, her grandmother came through and relayed a very personal detail to her that only she knew. So she drops the phone, starts crying. Her future husband grabs the phone and said, Jason, what did you just say to my future wife? And I was like, I'm leaving her
Yeah,
name out just in case. And I was
sure.
like, and so anyway, long story short, that was my first mediumship experience coupled with my first understanding that life after death is real. So
Yeah,
as an attorney, for the first 10 years after that, I kept them separate and hidden. I was terrified for people to know about it. I was working in
yeah.
places like Mississippi, Alabama, Texas, New Jersey, and Florida doing hurricane stuff. And at that stage of my life, I wasn't really ready to take the deep plunge. So it was a slow transformation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what a wonderful kind of juxtaposition to be like taking a deposition and having that happen in the evening, like these two worlds kind of colliding.
That happens. It's one of
Yeah.
the reasons I decided to go into the psychic thing because I ignored it. And then I'm traveling for a job, traveling for a deposition to another state, and I'm on an airplane, and a woman sitting next to me, and I can sense that she's grieving her daughter, but I didn't know what to say. And as time went on, her daughter's telling me while we're in the air, tell her about the seascape. Tell her when she goes to the house to get the seascape. So I waited and we landed and I was deplaning to catch another flight because we were in North Carolina and she was deboarding. And I said, hey, just so you know, I'm an attorney, blah, blah, blah. She knew that already because we talked during the flight. I said, if you have your daughter that passed away, she's telling me to get the seascape. And she stopped in her tracks and she looked at me and she's like, "Can I have your business card?" And I didn't know what she was gonna do with that, but I gave her my card, and she sent me images of the seascape with this whole narrative email about how her daughter had a divorce before she passed from cancer, and that she was staying at the North Carolina house because that's her summer house, and she went and got back into painting, and she painted the seascape, and she put that above the fireplace. So that was enough for me to understand my ego shouldn't get in the way of this, my fear shouldn't get away of this, because in the bigger picture of it all, you help people and it can make a really significant impact in a positive way. So when you weigh those, I've erred on the side of sharing when people are open to it, and I've also erred on the being able to be credible and say, "Yeah, I am an attorney and I am a psychic medium, and I've done thousands of readings, and I've worked for 25 years as an attorney, licensed in 5 states." I've got both sides balanced there. Now I'm doing life coaching. Well, I'm branching into
Yeah.
it.
Right, right. What stood out to me there was talking about the ego and the fear that builds on that analytical side. you know,
Yes.
lawyers are very good at responding to that risk, fear instinct. Um,
Yes.
so I'd love to hear some more about your. Um, I think you said 10 years of kind of keeping them separate, and
Yes.
what that experience was like. That you have this
You
thing
know,
building in you, Yeah.
I had the universe bring me people who I went out to a bar, and I'd have a few drinks after something, and then all of a sudden I'm picking up on their dead end. And I'm
Yeah.
relaying that while I had a few drinks in me, or I'm picking up on someone who had a significant other die in an accident. And those experiences bridged the 2 worlds because I had someone I was socializing with, and then all of a sudden I'm picking up all the deceased information that they needed to go on their journey with a healing journey or acceptance or peace or surrender, whatever that is, surrender of guilt. And, so there've been people who've been brought into my life along the way who
Mm.
helped me on that journey without them knowing it and without me realizing it.
Yeah, yeah. And so how much did that, like, ego and fear get in your way of in that 10-year period? I mean, was it
Well,
maybe
the
it
other
didn't.
people yeah,
Yeah,
it was still there, but the other people who were helping me through the experience, they weren't coming to me for the help. They were just placed in my life, and they had spiritual things that needed to be ironed out, and my abilities gave me the training and the experience internally, like an internship over that time frame, made me more confident, and it also helped them as well, and some of that kinda thing.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um Yeah, and I'm another when you were talking earlier, I'm just curious about, like, was that experience you had in the hotel room with, your grandfather coming through and the orbs of light, was that your first kind of real intuitive experience, or had you like, looking back, had you had those things throughout your whole life, or
I
was it
had
just kinda sudden?
Yeah, great question. I had glimpses. As a kid, I always had premonitions. I always knew things before they happened. I remember talking to my grandmother and my mom about it because I was raised in a single parent family. My grandmother's also psychic, so she understood it. But the way she dealt with it is don't talk about it, don't acknowledge it, ignore it. You're not supposed to know about that. And it's hard to tell a kid that when you're trying to understand the world around you. And so when I got older and I went through, I guess my grandfather passing was the first big thing. But even before that, I was driving in the car with a law school acquaintance at the time, and they had a truck and they were driving. He was driving. And all of a sudden, I grabbed the steering wheel and swerved it without even mid sentence. I'm in a sentence, and it's like my body lurched forward to move the steering wheel, and we avoided
Yeah.
a truck by inches as we went
Man.
towards the light. And that would have been my side of the truck, by the way. So, like, where we would have had the impact. So,
Yeah.
things like that happened, and overall, I think more of it happened once I decided over time to take the plunge to be more spiritual. The podcasting is actually what brought me out of my shell publicly because I had a
Mhm.
podcast with an alter ego. That's where Jason Zuk comes from. And I
Okay.
used that for my show even till now. The original reason I used that is I had a premonition dream in 2012 that I'd call myself Jason Zook, the social psychic. And in that dream, I attributed it to my grandfather because his last name was Zukovich. So when I woke up from that dream, I knew that was a good name to use. And I just started
Yeah.
using it.
Right. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I assume, I don't wanna assume, but I am. I'm assuming that, like, once you open the doors to that and, so, you get these hints growing up and you have this sense that there's something there, but when you open up to it, did you kind of feel like the floodgates opened at that point or,
Yeah,
like, you
over
couldn't kinda
time.
stop
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
So, like, if you go, like, fast forward from back then in 2012, that was because I came back to Tampa on a weekend and survived Easter weekend. It was Good Friday. I came back early to surprise everybody, and no one was there. So I sat on my couch, and I fell asleep on the couch, and that's where I had that premonition, right? And then after that, I decided to start a podcast in 2018, with no knowledge. I just started doing it at night, and it's almost like it was intrinsic within me. Kinda like now I know
Mm,
I have a green thumb at this stage of my life because I started a garden out of the blue last year when I moved. It's like
yeah.
you learn about yourself as you try new things or as you put yourself in those
Yeah.
positions, right? And so that's what's I've learned is the spiritual side of me is just like waking up everything, and it's the creative and the
Mm.
spiritual and the intuitive and the psychic. I think it's all interconnected through consciousness, and some people can be more sensitive to it than others. But I think we can all develop our consciousness abilities better, which we call our intuitive abilities.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, you read my mind where I wanted to go next.
Oops. Just kidding.
Um, we're as lawyers, and my podcast is largely about. It's a lot of overlap here, right? It's people, that are experiencing this kind of awakening. I think you kind of have to be thinking about this concept of being a healer in this space, and whether they call it intuitive or spiritual or just some consciousness or whatever, it all feels very similar to me. And so I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about something we referenced earlier, which is our brains are kind of reprogrammed in law school to be kind of hyper analytical and logical, and we get the reasonableness beat into our systems and all this stuff, and how like what your experience has been balancing that more creative intuitive side uh with your legal brain.
I love the question. I'll say it this way. The rules of professional conduct, when I was trying to approach how would I offer myself giving readings, I don't want to clash with advertising rules with the bars I'm in, or I decided to keep them separate. So, like, for example, anything psychic wasn't anything lawyer. So, if somebody contacted me about a reading, it's evening hours, weekend hours, and the law practice was strictly just my law stuff. And then when it came to like overlap, I've had moments where that would happen, but I always kept them separate. And my excuse was there's nothing in the professional rules of conduct or the ethics rules that um, anticipate what a psychic attorney with intuitive ability should do. And using the reasonable standard we're both familiar with, and when I've taken the MPRE a couple more times for each state I had to get licensed in. I figured
Yeah,
since it's not mentioned, I'll just keep them. I'll put up my own internal, like how we have to close ourselves off if we have a conflict of interest. Well, I
yeah, yeah,
closed
yeah,
myself off with my psychic and intuitive stuff while doing the lawyering role, and I've been able to do that all this time where it got to the point where my show started growing and people in my lawyer life knew about it and then understood me better. So it kind of blends.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, did you have a moment of, like, coming out of the closet as a I mean,
As
I guess it was
telling
like,
people?
yeah, as,
Yeah.
like, a spiritual psychic I mean, it
Yeah.
was I guess it was the podcast, but what was that
I
like?
even had a job where I worked at a firm and I was of counsel. So I had my own, I always have my own firm and then I have an office there and I'm working there. And one of the people that became my best friend was introduced to me while I'm working in that office and I picked up on her dad dying right away. And I was like,
Mm,
"Oh, I'm a medium by the way, but I work as a lawyer." But and then I picked up on her dad and that was like so explicit that she was like, "Yeah, only my dad would be the one coming through there." So in that respect, a lot of people learned about it because you're sitting there working as your lawyering job, and next thing you know, you're picking up on people's deceased relatives. I even had it actually years earlier. I was in Mississippi before, like, during that 10-year period, and I picked up on my one of my other secretaries, her boyfriend had I'm sorry, her brother had died and passed years earlier from HIV, and I picked up on him, and we sat there for 4 hours, and he came through
Mm,
and helped her in so many profound ways of healing and letting go of all that guilt she had bottled up, that it was very I've had moments like that throughout my life, and I realized that when they happen, they're miracles. I honor them, they're meant to happen the way they do, and, I kind of flow with it is the best way I would say,
yeah,
my
yeah,
approach with it.
yeah. I love that idea that you've mentioned now a couple times of like, look, we're here to help people and however that help comes through, whether it's advising somebody about the law and how to, what next steps to take in physical reality or letting this, healing come through is amazing. And yeah. And, it's inspiring because I think people, I think we're just trained to shut that stuff off and say there's only one way to help. I'm a lawyer. That's it. That's what I do. And a lot of what I've been talking about when I talk to trauma informed lawyers or mediators that are talking about being present and compassion and empathy and all of these things are all the same idea that you're talking about in terms of just turning the volume up on that intuitive side of things.
Definitely. It makes us more humanistic to our clients' needs when we're able to do that, and it also makes us, I
Yeah.
think, well-rounded where we're not just stuck in the logic or stuck in the facts and the evidence, and because what I deal
Yeah.
with, it's not just facts and evidence, it's like the disclosure stuff coming up right now. People are trying to get their minds around something with a paradigm shift, and I've already been through that in my life, so I feel like I'm well suited to adjust to whatever society is gonna be changing in the future.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to talk some more about that paradigm shift. Like what is where do you see things shifting broadly kind of culturally and if we can tie it into the legal system that's cool too.
Absolutely. I love to. Um, Everyone thinks this disclosure things about objects in the sky, and I'll tie this perfectly into the way a lawyering ties in here. When I've been
Yeah.
studying it, I've been realizing disclosures about accountability, transparency, who has the right to hold evidence that's not discernible to the public versus, we're going to keep this a top secret security issue. Um, Allowing informed citizens to make decisions with Congress and all that. And that's where I think the legal side of it ties in. The paradigm shift's going to be when people realize there's actually something there. The
Yeah.
smoke
Right.
isn't just the smoke, there's more than that. And I picked up on that intuitively over the years. So everything's kind of coming into a level of alignment, which as attorneys, we love when things can line up the perfect case, the perfect
Yeah.
facts. You've
Yeah.
always heard those over the years, right? We always try to set precedent into facts and make our argument and hopefully be compelling enough to persuade. Well, that approach with this kind of stuff is similar in the way that we have to persuade our society as to what are the limits of government authority. If you have government contractors holding documents that should be revealed to the public and help with transclosure, but they've been put up as a barrier, or you have a government unwilling to come clean with something that may not be so national security related anymore. More like we know something's up, but let's just, come clean. Like that's where I'm at. And I
Yeah.
started advocating for that more. I'm a caregiver for my mom. So I've taken a step back from the full time law. I get involved in passion projects. So that's one
Yeah.
of those I love First Amendment. I love constitutional law. I booked my class in law school in that
Mm.
area, the only area. But the passion for the Constitution our oath sworn to is so more prevalent now than ever before, so
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. There's a few groups or one primary group's coming to mind that my wife and I have been involved with called Core Light, and they talk a lot about the new paradigm of the heart, and that there's this kind of shift happening, and it might take decades. Yeah, yeah, there you
my
go.
little heart thing I'm showing you.
I love that. Yeah. I wonder if you've heard or thought or had that, that feeling of we're moving and the transition might be rocky and messy. I think we're already seeing that, but like, are we moving towards something more optimistic where we are more in tune with this stuff and more aligned with being human.
I want to raise a premonition I had back in 20 in the midst of the pandemic. I used to go walk in Tampa a lot along the water, just get clear my mind. Like that's a big part of my healing process every day. And I had a premonition, and I was watching a show in my head that was from 2030, and it gave me a replay of the decade like they do every 10 years on those shows. And it was so realistic, and I saw all this turbulence and volatile disunity in the mid part, like, right now. And then towards the end part of the decade, I saw coalition building. I saw people coming together on this in my head. So I'm very optimistic going forward that we as a society and as a world can grow and become better versions of ourselves. Sometimes there is gonna be obviously turbulence, but
Yeah.
I'm very confident. I have a pretty good outlook about the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
More heart-centered for everybody.
Yeah. And important to stay in that space these days, I think more than ever, being
Yes.
optimistic about where we're headed. Yeah. A couple more directions I want to explore with you, but one is, in reading some of your stuff online and seeing that caregiving is a big part of your life right now, and that I believe you're a cancer survivor as
Yes.
well. Um, those seem like pretty major moments, and curious how that ties into your journey and experience with intuition and bringing these worlds together.
Well, interestingly, yeah, I love the question. I'll say this. I'm a cancer survivor from 2018 with stage 1 kidney cancer. Didn't know I had it, but 3 months before I got diagnosed with it, I looked at myself in a window and the reflection said to me, "Wouldn't it be weird if you had cancer and didn't know it?" So I was mentally
Mm,
preparing myself to deal with cancer, didn't know I'd be diagnosed. Then I got diagnosed with it 3 months later in August of 2018. I had the procedure. The physical part got handled without chemo, with surgery, and I did a cryoblast, and so it froze it off my kidney, right? But the emotional suffering from that and the spiritual suffering from that and the distance with people that you're close with in your life when they're unable to connect with you anymore, because I had people treating me like I was already dead, or I had people coming
yeah.
up to me saying, "My mom
Mm,
had that kind of no, my dad had that kind of cancer. You'll get through it. It's okay." And I'm like, "Oh, you diagnosed 2 days earlier?" And I'm like, "Well, thanks for, making it sound like it's just going to get a tooth pulled, you know?"
yeah.
A
Right.
and so I
Right.
went through that, and then I remember it just shook me a lot to my core. I lost 50 pounds. I
Yeah.
ended relationships with people and work relationships and personal relationships. All that got clean slated for the most part. And then the pandemic hit. So we had that going on. And then my mom in 2014 2024 fell and broke her arm, and I became a caregiver. So I took a step back. All those things came together, and it made me realize that, you think you're going to have people come to the table when you need them. People you know for 30 years plus that you trust with your life. You've been through everything together. And those are the people that don't respond to you. Those are the people that
Mm,
don't follow up with you. And those are the people who literally put in a phone call to you in the middle of the night once and say, I think you're struggling too much. You might want to put your mom in a home and just go get a legal job. And I was like,
yeah.
I've had these people do that. And so I've shed it even more. And that's been going on even into this year. But with everything you shed, you get clarity and calm, and that's where my steady newsletter on LinkedIn's all about: being calm, creating calm, finding calm. And I can say that I found calm, and I have peace, and I know that I'm doing everything I can for my mom as her caregiver. And in the meantime, I'm reinventing my life in other directions creatively, and I love that I can do that.
Mm,
And so it's been a journey, but
yeah.
when I look at everything I've been through, I know there's a limit to what you can handle. Like, I was feeling burnt out even a few days ago, and I cleared my schedule from, like, life coaching and stuff, psychic stuff, because I decided that I just want to, like, take the time and regroup, and it helps a lot. So if anyone ever gets, like, burnt out, even as an attorney, powering through it's not necessarily that best option if you find overwhelm or underwhelm. Even you got to make efforts to really nurture yourself and nourish your soul. And I've been big on that. That's like, before we had our interview today, I was gardening outside. I have
Mm,
like 40 flower plants and stuff. I just recently put together even more updated ones, but it's like my counseling for myself, my zen
yeah.
place to be. And it helps with the
Yeah.
caregiving pressure and everything else.
Yeah. You got to recharge, right? And our society, our the legal industry, I don't know, like we're not great at that. we,
No,
we've
we're
really
not.
been conditioned to believe you gotta just,
Power through it. You
push
need to power
power
through
through
it.
it.
You gotta just
Yeah.
do what you gotta do, but power through it.
Yeah, don't quit, like, don't show weakness, don't all those things that come up in our minds. Um, yeah, I'll just share with you I had it was, I suppose, intuitive when I hit my point with being a lawyer. I was preparing for a phone call with a difficult opposing counsel that I worked with a lot, and I had a routine that I developed to kind of like shield and protect and do just kind of meditate for a minute before I do calls, and I did that, and I like slipped into this other space that was not my usual meditation zone, and when I wrote about it, I wrote that I actually went into my anxiety, like went into that feeling, and I got this big voice that was like, "You're killing yourself. You got to stop. You're living someone else's life," and showed me lawyers as healers
I love
uh,
that.
in that process. And I think I'm always curious how many people have those experiences um, and ignore them, or uh, because there was a moment where I'm like, God, am I going crazy? Like
You know,
this feels nuts, you know?
I'll contribute one thing to what you just said, made me think of something.
Yeah.
When I was practicing in Mississippi, even 3 years ago, there was an attorney I knew from 10, 20 years earlier. We had a good camaraderie, and I came in a case against him. And he's the big name up there, and I'm like, I work remotely. But anyway, we had a case, and I filed a suit. And this person called me on a Friday. I thought it was gonna be a pleasant call to talk about the case. He acted like I had shot somebody, and he screamed and he yelled and he carried on. And I finally waited till he was done. I said, "Are you through yet?" And he kept going. I said, "There's 2 things here I see. 1, you need counseling because this has nothing to do with the case. Secondly, I'm not recipient of this stuff. Like, from now on, we're just talking through emails and everything's in
Yeah.
writing, and that's where we're
Yeah.
going." And I had to do that. And I set that boundary on myself and on him because he crossed a line, and I'm not the puppy in the corner that deserves to be abused, nor am I gonna allow him to get away with it. So I called him out on it. And I
Yeah.
wrote letters and I documented it, and I was ready to go to the next step, like the bar, and say, "This person needs a referral to go get help." Luckily, the case settled. But it puts that pressure on you as an attorney. When you're dealing with mental health issues and you take it out in your work against other people, that becomes like contagious. And
Yeah.
professionally, we don't need to be doing that. We need to be
Yes.
treating each other with the basic kindness and decency that we swore an oath to defend and protect and uphold.
Yeah.
Like, Florida has a whole new thing, professional. We have to be professional, and I like that. And when you don't see it, these attorneys with the big cars and the big egos, they walk in the room, and the oxygen gets suffocated out of the room because their ego just eats it all. Those are the people I'd like to welcome into meditation, mindfulness,
Yeah.
and put your ego and check it at the door. Like, they would be a better attorney if they did that.
I know. I was just having this conversation yesterday with someone about um how much as a lawyer, how much more intimidating opposing counsel is when they come in and they're calm and rational
Yeah.
and reasonable and want to talk and are honest about their case. And
That's a refreshing moment when you get to meet attorneys like that. Those are ones you respect and you wanna work with again.
I know, and at the same time, they can be more intimidating because you're like, "Oh, man," like, they're not worried about anything, they're confident, they're cool, calm, collected.
They're ready. They're ready to take it to
I
court
know,
and do what they
yeah.
gotta do. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas I always felt that way too with people with lawyers that would act that way, and, there's that old saying, right? If you have the facts, pound on the facts. If you have the law, pound on the law. If you don't have either, pound on the table.
Yes.
Um,
It's true, they have
and
bravado.
Yeah, and so the people that come in doing that, acting that way, it's ridiculous and all kinds of things like that, but it also kind of I was never really intimidated by those people because 'cause I'm like, you don't have your shit together and you
How would a
clearly are
jury view these
worried.
people, right? How
Yeah,
outside third parties, judges,
I
assistants,
know.
like,
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Yeah, so that's so interesting, and it brings up a good point that I wanted to talk to you about earlier, which is I there is this I have found, or at least when I was going through this, when I was a conventional, traditional lawyer, um, I had this kind of knee jerk reaction to hearing this kind of stuff, about merging these things and lawyers as healers or lawyers as psychics or any of these kind of things I would have just rejected at a certain point in my life. Um, but the more I learn about it and talk to people and go down these paths, the more it just seems so obvious that opening up to these things makes you a better lawyer.
Absolutely.
Um, it helps your clients more, it makes you more effective. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and what your experience was.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
your question. I love the fact that we're discussing this because I think if we're able to be more in touch with our intuitive side, our sensitive side, our compassionate side, we'll be able to really look at the case, look at our clients, and see them as human beings and people we want to connect and help, not just another folder on the table or on the desk that we have to address before we leave for our trip or our flight. I think that happens too much with people, right? And a
Yeah.
lot of my clients are hurricane victims over the years, and it was really hard because I'd have 200 cases loaded up on me, and I did it, but I struggled. That would affect my personal time. I would work really hard on those files and turn them and do what needs to be done. But then I always had to remind myself, these are people. This is their life. This is their house. This is their stuff. And so, that's the part that I think it could help you with grounding yourself because
Mm.
you can be a successful, smart, you know, phenomenal litigator. I was more of a mediator type. I could litigate the cases. I never had to go to trials much because hurricane cases would settle before having to go that far. So I'd have all these thousands of mediations under my belt. So when I went against a traditional litigator that didn't care about mediating, I would put my litigation hat on and do what I needed to. But working with clients is probably where most of the bar grievances come from when you think about it. Most attorneys get so far up in their ego that they think they're high up and they don't need to deal with the client. And then when that happens, things go really sideways, not even communicating or whatever it is.
I was the same way. I was an plaintiff side employment lawyer, and so most of our cases settled at some point, and same thing. You're just trying to find a resolution, but doing it while litigating and playing the game, so to speak. And in thinking about treating people as people and not facts, not a set of
Yeah.
facts or,
Not a manila
whatever.
folder with some loose pages on
Yes.
the inside, right? Like,
I know. I know, that's such a good visual. Eh, Finding that when we tune into what the client really needs and wants and their objectives are, not only do we become more effective lawyers, but they become, and I've said this a lot lately, I don't like this term, but I use it anyway, they become better clients. I've had a lot of discussions lately about client management and this whole concept that we client control and all these words that lawyers use, which I don't like, but we use them and it's a part of the practice.
I mean, that just sounds like a raging fire on a hill and you got to put down the stuff to slow it down. It doesn't sound like effective lawyering and listening and being.
No, it doesn't at all. And yet you hear people use the phrase and the term, but it's almost, um, this is in the spiritual, intuitive realm of letting go of control, letting things flow,
Big
letting
lesson
letting
there.
things, yeah, letting things come in when they're there, and that when you actually may gain more control over your client by letting go of control of your client.
Yeah. Empowering the client by letting them know you're listening to
Yeah,
them and you care about them and you're not just yesing them or giving them
right.
some lip service. Like
Yeah, yeah,
candidness helps with that and openness, and transparency, like with the case or
yes.
whatever it is you're like I always tell clients when I work with them, this is what I think. And I'm not giving you this opinion to sway you. I'm just letting you know where my mind is on this so we're on the same page with each other, that kind of thing. And it always seemed like it would help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they feel, I mean, it's a lot of this is really gets into a lot of trauma-informed practices of creating a safe space for people. I mean, all these people, like you were talking about your clients have been through some traumatic event, losing their house, losing their job, whatever the thing is, and they come to us for help. And when we view them as a manila folder, they lose out on this huge we lose out on this huge opportunity to really truly help them and
and
not
make a
just
positive impact for them and let them know, like, we're here to relieve that trauma,
yeah, yeah, and not just, get them a check and move on to the next one, you know?
for sure.
I always say the money's helpful, obviously, it's what but there's so much more. Um,
It's a process. People need to
yeah,
see that when you lawyer, it's a process. It's not just getting the money in or settling a case or signing a case up and moving it on. It's multiple stages, and you have to have your A game on and hopefully do it all the time and not burn out. Not burn
yeah,
out, right? That's the
I know.
when you have your parent fall and break their arm, you have to make a decision. Can I practice law right now? I was like, "No, I can't practice law right now. I'm putting myself on focusing caregiving." And that's to balance it out for myself.
Yeah. I'm in a really similar place, in a different way, but I've got 2 young kids, they're 4 and 7, and we've decided to homeschool them starting this year, and a big part of
That's
that was
awesome.
we felt like we missed out on this early because my wife and I were both practicing and doing the full caseload, when they were little, and, we spent a lot of time with them, but we also once we stepped away from our practice a little bit, you're like, "Oh, man, we're missing these windows of time with these little guys."
Time is the value. You're so right to say that. So right to say that. And if you have the ability to structure something where you can do that, it's like, do it because you only have that one part with them at this stage of their life where you could impact and work with them on that level. You always can have cases.
I
You
know.
could always go back and be
I
a
know.
lawyer, like
I know, I was looking at that too and be like, "Man, I can work," they can graduate law school or graduate not law school, graduate, college or high school, move on to the next thing, and I've got another 20 years where I can go back and be a
correct.
lawyer and sit at a desk and do my thing, but, like, you lose out on this, little window. By the way, I would wanna be really clear, I do not expect my kids to go to law school. I don't know, that
No.
was that slip.
Going back in time right now, would I still do everything exactly the same way? Probably not. I would
Yeah,
I mean, I like the educational stuff I did, and I enjoyed the experiences, but I probably wanna be more
yeah.
balanced earlier in life instead of waiting till,
Mm,
I'm 50 now, so, like, I still
yeah,
have another 20-some years left, so I wanna make them the best possible in every way possible,
absolutely. Yeah.
all aspects of my life.
So I'm wondering if you could talk. I think most of my listeners are lawyers or have some experience in the legal system, and if you could talk some more about what it's looked like for you bridging the gap between your intuitive practice and your kind of analytical law practice. You've talked a little bit about that early phase of, like, keeping them separate, and I wonder as that time went on and you, again, were coming out of the closet more, like, how did those 2 things merge, and how do you balance it now?
Now it's gotten to the point where I mean, I still keep all my licenses, and I do all the CLEs, and I have some cases actually, that I'm doing right now. When it comes to balancing the intuitive side of myself as the attorney hat, like when you have your dad role as you're a parent and then you put on your lawyering hat, they're two different hats. You're really not doing both at the same time. And I've trained myself with even intuition because I don't want to ever have a disadvantage against an attorney or someone else I'm working with that they say, oh, he knows things because he could derive them and intuitively figure things out. So as I practice law, I strictly do just the fact based normal. It's like I take off my lens and
Yeah.
I am a lawyer. Oh, okay, wait, I'm a psychic again, and I
Yeah.
keep it that way.
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
in my mind, I train myself that way. So that I keep this. It's a discipline. It's like if you have a conflict of interest with somebody in a law firm, and they have to shield the person off. I use that mindset for myself, and I discipline myself for that. That's to avoid suspicion too.
Well, I wanna ask about that because there is a lot of fear for lawyers, period, and there's fear about, like, opening up to these other practices, and I wonder, has that ever been weaponized against you? Like, have you had anyone try to use that?
You know what it is? I think I had to work so hard to prove myself early in my career. And I came out of law school and I was overeducated at the time without the actual practical experience, meaning I got my LLM from Georgetown, come back to Tampa, trying to find a legal job. And I was stuck for a year trying to find a position. I worked in the government and I wanted to do private practice, but any private practitioner who interviewed me was like, I really like your credentials, but you don't have the practical work experience. And that was the end of it. So finally, I had a job where I had the experience to do it. And when I worked as the attorney all those years, I always felt like I had to be above my own standards to prove for myself. So I was an overachiever for the most part and did that way. So when it came to balancing the intuitive side, remember those 10 years I told you I was a reluctant psychic? I didn't really put any effort into it. And people would sit next to me and I'd be picking up on their relatives, or I would meet someone who's loved one passed. And next thing you know, I'm spending like time reading for them on the side. And it's like my heart goes out to them. So that all tied together, compassion. It just worked that way. So I guess ever
Yeah.
since that, even now, like I have lawyer friends who I read for from time to time privately, but it's not in the lawyer hat at all. It's just, hey, let's talk about what I'm picking up for you. Let's discuss this, and then it's treated as such.
I asked a question and I didn't know how you're gonna answer that, but I have found that all of the fears that I had early in my, transition away from my conventional practice were completely unfounded, and I had all these, things I was worried about, that not only weren't true, but, often the opposite was. Yeah.
Fear is a bad four-letter word to me because, I mean, we
Yeah.
need it. You need to have
Yeah.
fear in order to, like, not get burned on the stove or do
Right.
something that
Right.
could be really bad, right? Fear for me, like, when I had the cancer, I compartmentalize fear now. So when I'm
Mm,
afraid of something, I put it in a box, and then I use manifestation and affirmation, all that, to kinda navigate around it. So but it is an influence in our life. It's a counterbalance, right? But it's a limitation. If you allow it to limit yourself, you can literally I had a case come to me recently, and it's representing 10 families against a religious institution with a lot of corruption and a lot of bad things, one of the oldest religious institutions. And my first response was fear. I was like, "I can't handle all this. I can't do this. It's too much." And then I meditated and prayed on it, and I was told, "Yes, you can." So
mm,
here I've been tangoing with this religious institution for 6 months, and we're about to amplify. I got another lawyer coming in, so I got a relief hitter. But I'm ready. I'm ready to tango because I was afraid at first, but I'm not afraid now. And I think when you
mm.
walk through that doorway and realize not to be afraid anymore, the world isn't as intimidating as it was before, even in our legal sense, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Great advice. And that case sounds fascinating. We don't have time to get into that. It sounds really interesting.
It's gonna be interesting for sure.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, we're gonna kinda wrap up. I chose this title, Lawyers as Healers, based on this quote from, Chief Justice Warren Burger, who said our obligation is to, serve as healers of human conflict. Just curious what I like getting people's perspective on that phrase and how it fits into your practice and life and, what your reaction is to it.
It fits perfectly and squarely within my own self concept of keeping yourself calm, allowing yourself to be mindful, sitting in the present moment, reminding yourself you're safe when you need to. And when you work with clients in your mind, when you're safe and you're calm, you could be a better healer for them. You could help them when it comes to conflict. You don't need to make your job and your role as a disruptor. You can be that person that allows your client to present what they need to say to you, and be that compassionate ear, that calm force. And as healers, with conflict, especially when you look at conflict, you see chaos, you see disunity, you see 2026. What we have to do as attorneys is we need to turn the pressure down, deregulate. If our bodies feel it internally with fight or flight, the cortisol, I feel it all the time as a caregiver. I quietly grieve every day as a care. That's normal. Um, you have to learn to take that self-care for yourself. But then also, it's gonna make you better prepared to deal with any client that comes to you or anyone who comes to you with it, whatever role in your life you have as a father or a son or a caregiver or a person that's just a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, Jason, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. We could go a lot longer, but
Yeah.
we'll wrap it up for today and maybe have you back later on. Where can people find out more about you? And I'll put links in the notes too, but I want to make sure you get a little plug in there.
Oh, thank you. You can find me on most social media with the social psychic handle or the Jason Zuk. You could also go to my website, thesocialpsychic.com. My law website is ciofalolaw.com. And you could check out my podcast, The Social Psychic Radio Show, where all podcasts are found. And I'm putting together some new podcasts, and I'll be doing social psychic lives on social media shortly in the future as well. So feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, and as a follower on, at least on LinkedIn, I'll just tell everyone I love your stuff and it's really fun to follow along. So,
I really
all right.
appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. So thanks for joining me. I just want to close by saying, to anyone listening, whether you approach these ideas and these concepts, through psychology or spirituality or intuition, I think a lot of this conversation is just about learning to listen more deeply to yourself. I think Jason and I are both inviting you to do the same, which is just to become more honest about who you are and who you want to be and how you want to contribute to the world, and listen and take action on those things as they come up. So until next time, everyone, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be well, and we'll talk next time.